Hi guys, we are going to go ahead and continue lesson 2.1 with part D, converting and comparing rational numbers. So we'll start with converting fractions to decimals. If you look at this, it says write -2 1/4 as a decimal. Well, we know that the -2 is really just a whole number, and the 1/4 is my fraction that will become the decimal. So I need to set up my problem with what my answer is going to look like. I'm going to have a whole number on the left side of my decimal point, and I'm going to have my decimal on the right side. So since I already know what my whole number is, I'm going to go ahead and just put that in there. So I have -2 here. Now, on the right side, I need to have my decimal. So I need to figure out how to change 1/4 into a decimal. Well, 1/4 is the same as saying 1 divided by 4. So I'm going to do some long division. I'm going to do 1 divided by 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 1, the numerator, inside the box, like we always do. And my denominator will go on the outside of the box. Here's my 4. Now, we first want to see how many times does 4 go into 1? Well, 4 doesn't go into 1, right? So I need to add a 0. Here's my 0. So I have to add the decimal point in. 4 goes into 10 2 times. And 2 times 4 equals 8. So I'm going to subtract 8. So 10 minus 8 equals 2. And I'm going to go ahead and bring down another 0. So how many times does 4 go into 20? Well, 4 goes into 20 5 times. 4 times 5 equals 20. And I am left with 0. So 20 minus 20 equals 0. So that tells me that my decimal is a terminating decimal, meaning it ends, and it is going to be 0.25. So I take everything to the right side of that decimal and I put it on the right side of my decimal up here. So -2 1/4 is the same as saying -2 25/100. All right, so we're going to try another one. We have write 5/11 as a decimal. If you notice, I don't have a whole number this time. All I have is the fraction. So I'm going to set it up the same way. I'm going to do 5 divided by 11. So here's my whole box. Obviously, I don't know what to put in that, right? Because I don't have any whole number. So if I don't have any whole number, what would I use? I would use a 0. So there's a 0 in my whole number box. And I'm trying to find what goes in my decimal box. So 11 goes into 5 0 times. So I'm going to go ahead and just add my decimal point and bring down a 0. This one's hard to see. I'll put it bigger. All right. So how many times does 11 go into 50? Well, 11 goes into 50 4 times. And 4 times 11 equals 44. So I'm going to subtract 44 from the 50. And that equals 6. So once again, I need to bring down another 0. So 11 goes into 60 5 times. So I'm going to put my 5 up here. And 11 times 5 equals 55. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 55 from 60. When I subtract that, I end up with 5, and I bring down another 0, and I have 50. And oh my goodness, that's the same number as I had to start with. So I know it's going to be a 4 again, and a 5 again, and a 4 again, and a 5 again. So that means that what I have here is a repeating decimal. And I show that by putting a line over the pattern that repeats, in this case, the 4 and the 5. So my answer will be 0 and 45/100 repeated. Okay, we'll put a line above it to show that it is a repeating decimal. Okay, great. Now we're going to move on to the next slide. Give me just a second. And we are going to learn how to convert decimals to fractions. So I have the fraction -0 26/100, and they want me to write it, or I have the decimal -0 26/100, and they want me to write it as a fraction in simplest form. So step 1, I need to put the digits after the decimal into the numerator of my fraction. Okay, so that means my 26 is going to go on top because the numerator is on top. And step 2 wants me to determine what place value the last digit is in and put that as the denominator. So I go over and I say, okay, the 2 is in the tenths, the 6 is in the hundredths, the 6 is in my last digit, so I know 100 is going to go on the bottom in the numerator. So it should look like this. I have negative 26. I put my digits after the decimal as the numerator, and hundredths because I'm in the hundredths place. And finally, I just need to simplify the fraction. So I have negative 26 hundredths, and I need to find the greatest common factor. In this case, the greatest common factor is 2. So I'm going to divide the top by 2. And if I divide the top by 2, I have to divide the bottom by 2 as well. So what I'm going to end up with is negative 26 divided by 2 equals negative 13. And then 100 divided by 2 equals 50. And I cannot simplify it any further. So that is my answer, negative 13/50ths. So that is the same thing you will use anytime you're converting a decimal to a fraction. If there happened to have been a number in the whole number place, I would have simply put it on the outside as a whole number in the fraction. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to comparing rational numbers. So I have two rational numbers here, negative 3/4 and 25 hundredths, and they want me to compare them. So I have to start with step 1. Step 1 is to convert all rational numbers to the same format, because it's really hard to compare a fraction to a decimal because it's hard to know where they would line up on a number line, right? When we compare things, we're usually putting them on a number line. So I'm going to start by changing my fraction into a decimal. And we remember how to do that. We use long division. So I'm going to go ahead and set up that problem. I have 3 divided by 4, and I need to add in a 0. So I'll put my decimal point in both places and bring down a 0. So I have, how many times does 4 go into 30? 4 goes into 37 times. 7 times 4 equals 28. So I'm going to need to subtract 28 from 30. And that equals 2. So then I'm going to need to bring down another 0. So I'll bring it on down. And 4 goes into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 equals 20 exactly. So I know that I will have 0 left over. So negative 3/4 is the same as negative 0.75. All right, so now that they're both in the same format, I can move on and do the next step. The next step is simply to place the rational numbers on a number line. So I need to start with my number line, and I'm going to start labeling it. So if I put 0 right here, this one is 0, and I'm going to label it 0. And then I have 0.1 here, 0.1. And then the next one would be 0.2. And then on the opposite side, I'm going to have negative 0.1, negative 0.2. So I'm going to go ahead and fill those in. Now, as you can see, it was really hard for me to fill these in. So I have put in negative 0.1, negative 0.2, and then I skipped negative 0.3, and here's negative 0.4. I skipped writing negative 0.5, negative 0.6, negative 0.7, and negative 0.8. So the next step is to simply mark my numbers or my rational numbers on this number line. So the first one is negative 0.75. So I'm going to come over here. Here's negative 0.7. So negative 0.75 is going to be just a little bit closer to negative 0.8. So here is my negative 0.75. 0.75. And then I need to label my negative. Doesn't look like a negative. There we go. Negative 0.75. And I need to label my 0.1. Here's my 0.1. So now that it's all labeled, it's really easy to see which is bigger than the other. So my last step is to determine which is greater. Well, clearly 0.1 is the greater number. So that means that negative 0.75 is less than 0.1. And I would write it like this. There we go. We were able to compare rational numbers. You would use the same method if you were having to put things in least to greatest. You would just go along and start with the smallest number, the one furthest to the left, and just put them in order that way. So there you go. You can compare rational numbers now. Thank you.